Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. And folks, we're getting closer and closer to the start of the season. I know it sounds insane, but I am truly excited to have Rockies baseball come back. I recognize it will probably be another difficult season, but for the first time in a long time, it does feel like there are some younger pieces to be genuinely excited for. I mean, we will talk about one of those names, Jordan Beck, today, as well as obviously, we've seen Kyle Karros and Ryan Ritter step up during the spring. What will Chase Dollander bring to the table? Overall, there is some things to actually be excited about. And it is fun to see some young guys show that potential, that growth. But to start today's show, we talk about a guy who just got some really bad news, and that's RJ Pettit, diagnosed with a UCL sprain, which he is now, there's now going further evaluation for what comes next. The scary thing about something like this is it could lead to needing Tommy John. If Pettit needs Tommy John, that means he's done for the season. On top of that, if he does need Tommy John, it leads to a load of different issues for the Rockies in retaining Pettit because he was selected in that Rule 5 draft. He was the first pick for the Rockies and had a legitimate chance to be in the bullpen this year for the Rockies. It also kind of goes into what we were talking about, that there's a lot of guys who are going to be at that AAA level that will have an opportunity to pitch because of things like this. But kind of going back into it with Pettit, it's an issue if it's Tommy John for obviously multiple reasons. First of which, he would miss the full season. He's not going to come back until he's 27 or 28 years old at that point because the recovery process can take quite some time. On top of that, though, for the Rule 5 draft, you need to be on the active MLB roster for 90 days. And he would not hit that if he needs season-ending surgery. At that point, he would have to be put on waivers, and he would have to clear waivers to come back to the Rockies. And then the Rockies would have to offer him to Detroit for like $50,000. So there's a lot of issues with this being a season-ending injury, if that is the case. You hope it's something more minor. Give him an opportunity to still have a chance to pitch for the Rockies this year. But really some bad news for Pettit and the Rockies as we are less than a month away from the season. It also creates new questions of if he is not good to go and if he is out for the year, who are some different names that will need to step up? So a lot goes into this. You obviously hope that it is nothing serious, that it is a quick recovery, and that he can be out pitching again at some point this season. So really tough news to start the week. And we'll just kind of have to wait and see what the full diagnosis is and what will be required for Pettit. And that kind of goes into pitching woes for the Colorado Rockies. 2025 was a disaster. It was a really, really bad year for the Colorado Rockies. And I think the big question is, how do they prevent from that happening all over again? You look across the internet from a lot of different experts, they see the Rockies as a team that is going to be the worst in baseball again. Fangraph predicts less wins. They predict a 43-win season for the Colorado Rockies. It is dire for Rockies fans in what will be expected of this team. And one of the big things is just the doubt in this pitching staff. A starting rotation that was worst in baseball. They obviously have brought in a couple of different names. But ultimately, what are some of the different ways that the Rockies are actually trying to implement change to prevent what happened in 25? The first of which is the different pitch types that we're seeing. We've seen it from Senzatella especially, but most of these guys you're going to see more sinker pitches. I think that's been a big key from Alan Leichman, is the four-seam fastball gets beat up a lot at Coors Field unless you have enough velocity that can overcome that lack of movement. And now the Rockies relievers do have quite a few guys that can touch 100. Still, the big thing is also control, and if you don't have that control and it becomes wild, that speed doesn't really mean too much. So expect to see more splitters, hopefully more sliders for the guys that can actually be effective with that pitch. It's interesting because Jimmy Herget has even said last year, going from San Francisco to Coors Field, he was losing close to 8 inches of movement on his pitches just because of the altitude. And so that is kind of what the Rockies are facing up against, is obviously guys who are used to seeing more movement. They're getting less of that at Coors Field. So not only that, it's obviously having more under your belt. It's why this front office went and got a couple of different pitchers that can hit 5, 6, 7 different pitches. Michael Lorenzen bolsters or claims that he can hit 7 pitches. I would be curious, though, how many of those is he actually using in a game? And maybe that's part of the strategy, is you use a couple more against specific teams. It all is kind of going into this mad science and plan for the Colorado Rockies. The concerning part about Lorenzen is he's been shelled in now multiple games. We haven't seen Quintana or Sugano yet, so it will be interesting to see how those vets will look when they actually start pitching in the spring. Now, obviously, the World Baseball Classic is going on, so it will be interesting when they come back, and if they will have much with the Rockies before the season starts. So for this Colorado Rocky team, it is using different pitches, finding out just different recipes of success at Coors Field, and really honing in on that, and ultimately, hopefully leaning in more on a bullpen that we expect to be better than it was last year. Now, a lot of experts will say that this bullpen won't be much, but I do think there are some really solid arms for the Colorado Rockies this year and in their bullpen. It's just a matter of if they can get their control under wraps, because that will be the biggest thing. Can you get ahead in counts 0-1, 0-2, and then start to mess with those batters? Because if you're falling behind 2-1, 3-0, 3-1, you get in a lot of trouble, especially at Coors Field. So I don't know. I am excited, though, with Alan Leichman and what some of the different things that we will see for the Colorado Rockies. But it's something that we've talked about a lot on this show. It's why I'm also excited for the season of just what will be some of the different strategies that the Rockies will implement, what will work, and I think we will know what doesn't work. It will probably be very apparent in some of those games where they give up 10, 11, 12 runs, but also figuring out some of the different recipes that can and will work at Coors Field. And so we talk about pitching. It's obviously a lot more broad. Let's look at something more specific, and let's look at Jordan Beck. We've talked about a lot of guys in this spring. We've talked a lot about Kyle Karros, Charlie Condon, Ryan Ritter, Brenton Doyle, Tovar. We've mentioned. But Jordan Beck is a really interesting name for the Colorado Rockies, and the fact that he could be a pillar for the Rocks. He could most certainly be a guy that the Rockies could build part of this core that we've talked about. Tovar is in the core. Hunter Goodman appears to be in the core. Brenton Doyle appears to be on the core, even though he is just held up as bait every year. But the Rockies need more guys that they can lean on and more guys that they feel comfortable with building and growing this future. I think Kyle Karros has a great opportunity of being that, and I think Jordan Beck has a legit opportunity. He's a solid defender in the outfield, and offensively, he had I'll call it a mini breakout, because there were definitely some things that were not good. His whiff rate and his strikeout rate need to improve for him to be a good bat at the major league level. I would say he was all right in 2025. Hit 258, 416 slugging, and his OPS was 733. So not bad by any means, and honestly one of the better Rockies bats last year. But those are all numbers that could and should improve this season. And for the Rockies, an improvement from Beck would really help, I think, solidify the outfield, or at least 2 out of the 3 guys. If you can have Doyle and Beck be both guys that can give you some really solid slugging and production at the plate, as well as being great defenders, that opens up a lot for the Colorado Rockies. It gives them a lot more confidence. On top of that, it does also probably open up that Pandora's box again if Beck is really solid of what can you get out of Brenton Doyle. Because I know the Rockies have considered moving him. They want to get his value up. If Doyle starts the season strong and Beck starts the season strong, there is a world where the Rockies look to move on from Brenton Doyle. It's not something that I necessarily would agree with, depending on what they can get in return, but it is something that makes sense if they can get more value out of trading someone like Brenton Doyle. But a lot of that also has to come from someone like Jordan Beck and some of these other outfielders. If the rest of this outfield looks really bad, and you're trading Brenton Doyle for maybe it's another starting pitcher, maybe it's someone in the infield, whatever that might be, that causes a lot more hurt because, man, Beck is struggling, McCarthy's not good, blah, 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 blah. You can go on and on of, hey, man, maybe we shouldn't get rid of our only outfielder. If Beck can be solid, if you can get Zach Veen to be a solid, bat, as well as someone in the outfield, as well as Ryan Ritter, Tyler Freeman, if all these guys can actually be solid for the Colorado Rockies, gives you more to work with when it comes to actually making trades, and which is another avenue for the Rockies to get better. I think that Jordan Beck is one of the few players on this team that can actually be a really good player for the Colorado Rockies. There's guys that can be solid, that can be okay. Beck has shown enough flashes that he can actually be very talented for the Rockies, and one of those key pillars that we've mentioned on the show, who are going to be the foundational pieces for the Colorado Rockies in this rebuild so that in 2-3 years from now, they are ready to compete for even a wild card spot. Preferably you're looking at, hey, we're competing for a division title. That's really hard to do when you're playing against the Dodgers and aggressive ownership groups like the San Diego Padres. The Giants will always try to be competitive, and the Diamondbacks have shown that they're a very good baseball team at times as well. They were in the World Series just a couple years ago. So for the Rockies in this rebuild, it's really important to have those pieces that you feel comfortable with. And man, what would it mean if Jordan Beck can be one of those pieces? So 2026 is a big year for Jordan Beck. Obviously, players can be a bit of a roller coaster year in, year out. But the great players and the really, really good players, they can be more steady with gradual inclines. And that's what they need out of Jordan Beck. They've had too much up and down from a lot of different guys. It's start to actually see guys just be consistent and be consistently good, which we just haven't seen from anyone on this roster. We've seen some really, really strong flashes from players, but no real strong consistency. And that's the big thing for Jordan Beck. Can you be consistent, and can you be a key piece for the Colorado Rockies moving forward? Finally, we end today's show. ESPN's Top 100. I'll save you time. You don't need to visit. No Rockies listed. Hunter Goodman couldn't make the list. He was on MLB's Top 100, but ESPN said, nope, we are not interested in adding Hunter Goodman. Obviously, as Rockies fans, I think we all believe he deserves at least some recognition, and no, his omission does kind of feel like, I'll say, a small or slight slap in the face, because I also do get it. The Rockies were a bad team last year. They failed to win 50 games. If you're a team that can't win 50 games, it can be hard to look at the bright spots, but there are bright spots on the Colorado Rockies. However, Hunter Goodman, not seen as bright enough to make the top 100. And I will be interested to see. We talked about the pillars, the consistency. If him and Tovar, Doyle, Jordan Beck, if some of these guys can actually produce strong enough seasons, what would it take to actually be listed as a top 100 player in baseball? It's not crazy to want that. It's not crazy to want to have multiple players on that list. And once again, it just shows the overall state and view of the Colorado Rockies. Not considered highly by many experts or anyone really in the space of baseball. And this year is a real chance to actually prove that they have legit talent and are going in the right direction. So it's tough to see, but hopefully you don't really need bulletin board material as a team that struggles, but hopefully it can be something as something to grow on and to build on, and just for these players to just be solid this year. That's all we really ask, and it's not crazy to ask. Again, as fans, to just have players that are top 100 guys. And I think Hunter Goodman is absolutely that. But, I mean, he's like in the 90s. And so for the Rockies, how do you build a roster so you can have multiple guys like that? How can you have a roster that isn't the laughingstock of baseball? And that's a note I'm going to leave you on. So this does it for another Rockies Daily. I hope you like this show. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, share, do whatever you need to do. I really appreciate you watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.